Now, it's no news that the former central bank governor of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, resigned from his position sometime last month, giving room for Olayemi Cardoso to take up the position. Then, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir recently sacked the central bank governor, Johnny Ohisa Damian, and other senior finance officials, the second time he has removed a central bank chief in just over a year without giving reasons. Now, we understand that thousands have taken to the streets of Ghana's capital, Accra, to demand the removal of the central bank governor, Ernest Addison, and his two deputies for what they say is the mismanagement of the economy during the worst debt crisis in a generation. Remember that we did discuss Ghana's scary spike in inflation rates some days ago. Now, some people have attributed this to the central bank governor and his deputies. Now you see what I mean when I call it a plague in the finance sector across the continent. Well, to help us understand the current situation in Ghana and to further discuss this, we're now joined by Joe Jackson, Director of Business Operations, Dalex Finance, Accra, Ghana. Thank you so much, Joe Jackson, for joining us. Joe Jackson, can you confirm that you can hear us, please?
Yes, thank you too. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you join us as well. All right, Joe Jackson, Addison, who has been in the post since 2017 and whose tenure runs for another 2 years, said that last month, improved economic indicators will soon lead to higher incomes and purchasing power. But then a stabler exchange rate, lower inflation, and more robust growth have not yet helped those struggling to meet or make ends meet. What exactly is the central bank governor and his deputies doing wrong?
Well, first of all, they've engaged in 2022. They engaged in a massive amount of deficit financing for the government of Ghana. Remember, 2022, the government was shut out of the Eurobond market. It could not borrow, and it did not reduce its expenditure. And all it did was just go to the central bank and take money, deficit financing. What was the result? It was deficit financing to the tune of over 50 billion cedis, which at that time worked out to something like $5 billion. That has fueled inflation like never seen before. At its peak, a few months ago, inflation was over 54%. It has now dropped a little to over 40%, but inflation is still very high. And the single biggest reason is the deficit financing that the central bank engaged in 2022. So that is really at the heart of the anger and the frustration that the central bank is facing. Remember also that this talk of macroeconomic parameters, etc., really does not placate the masses, the middle class, the lower middle class, whatever in Ghana, simply because Ghana has repeatedly had macroeconomic indicators seemingly trend in the right direction without any effect at the bottom of the pyramid. And you're talking about people who are facing horrendous inflation, horrendous levels of inflation, drugs, food, education, everything has doubled, sometimes tripled in price. And so when you think about it, the constitution of this country says the central bank governor is responsible, not the minister of finance, but the central bank governor is responsible for price stability, is responsible for exchange rate stability. Then there is cause to believe that we should be holding the central bank governor, even according to the constitution, for the challenges and the pain that the country is facing.
Hey, Joe Jackson, are you still there with us?
Yes, I'm here with you.
All right. Now, all of these that you have explained, does it have anything to do with Ghana's ability or inability to join the IMF? Because some of the protesters did mention that there was an opportunity to, join the IMF and get, financial assistance, but because of some actions or inactions of a CBN governor and his deputies, they couldn't. They missed out on that opportunity. So does it have anything to do with that as well?
I would find that, giving a dog a bad name and literally hanging it. The decision not to go to the IMF was a political one. It was the ruling, it was our president, and repeated over and over again by the Minister of Finance and his deputies that Ghana will not go to the IMF. So it is right that we did not go to the IMF early enough, and that we are taking far more pain than we should have if we had gone to the IMF early enough for a bailout. Yet at the same time, I don't think the decision was in the hands of the governor of the central bank. I think that was a political decision, and so it is the political authority, the powers that be, that must be held responsible for that, for the extreme level of pain we are facing for not asking for help earlier.
Right. Joe Jackson, I'm glad you did mention political decision, because I would like for you to walk us through how the structure of Ghana's finance or the sectors generally is. Because a lot of people would ask, can the Central Bank of Ghana's governor make decisions independent of the administration's approval? If no, then why exactly is the governor being blamed?
Good. In theory, the governor is extremely independent. He may be appointed by the president, but he has a lot of power. And in order to insulate him, the governor retires on his salary. The governor is supposed to, by the constitution, keep price stability, keep exchange rate stability. The governor is one of the most powerful people where the economy is concerned. The governor should not bow to political pressure. And if there's anything that we can hold this governor responsible for, is for not saying no. And he should have said no several times. When the politicians came to him to say, give us money, deficit financing, the governor and his deputies should have resisted. After all, even though they were appointed by the powers that be politically, once you're appointed, they can't do anything to you. Like you are like a judge, a Supreme Court judge. You are appointed, but once you are appointed, you are independent. Once you're appointed, you can't be removed that easily unless your term ends. And that is the challenge that we are facing. And that is why people are so angry. But the truth of the matter is this. I personally have a challenge with going after the governor and not taking on the political authorities for the deficit financing that they requested and received. Yes, the governor should be held responsible. But why are we leaving the political authorities alone?
Thank you so much for that. But before we go further, I would like to, we have someone joining us now, Professor Lord Mensah, Financial Economist, University of Ghana. Thank you so much, Professor Lord Mensah, for joining us. Professor Mensah, are you there? Okay, Joe Jackson, we're going to continue the conversation. Now, looking at all these things that we have discussed, we've talked about the context, and we now understand why the people are, angry, calling for his resignation, their agitations and all of that. But say that there is a positive response to this protest, and let's say that the governor and his deputies are replaced. What is the guarantee that the next people coming after them are going to make any change, any positive change?
I don't think that the governor will resign. I doubt that he will be replaced. And so that I would be shocked if that happened. The protest happened, but I don't think there's enough gravitas behind the protest to get that sort of result. In any case, the issue is how do we ensure that our governors are independent enough? how do we legislate effective zero finance for the successive governments that come, so that we don't end up in this situation again? It is this particular governor is representative of all the other governors that we've had, in that when there's a challenge, they bow to political pressure. Those statutes we have about zero financing, which have been rammed through as a condition to the bailout by the IMF, should be set in stone. It should be such that we require a super majority in parliament to set that aside. Then we'll be in a better place.
I'd like to say thank you so much, Director of Business Operations, Dalex Finance, Accra, Ghana, Joe Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Well, this is where we call it a wrap on Village Square Africa. Thank you so much for watching, and join us again on another episode as we bring you the happenings across the African continent and, of course, with analytics. I'm Blessings Mosugu. Thanks for watching.